It's a Friday, the 6th of September 2024, and this is Spectrum Xtra, reviewing the major events of the week. My name is Kenneth Lukwagandason, your host. Today I have a panel of four. Let me introduce them. His Worship Fabrice Rulinda, the Mayor of Entebbe Municipality. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening to our listeners and viewers, and good evening, Kenneth. So happy to be here.
Also in studio, Mr. George Musisi, lawyer at the National Unity Platform Party. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening to the listeners. Pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to meet my brothers, Fabrice and Job, and my long-time friend who represents my interests in NRM.
So you've decided to introduce the panel, and I hope you're not here also to host the show this evening.
Well, if the host doses, I shall. That's what happens of all the
really?
government.
For the time you've been here,
the government is capable of displacing and replacing.
Right. Also in studio, Mr. Job Kija, governance expert, author of the latest governance trends analysis tracker. He works with Innovations for Democratic Engagement and Action. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Kenneth. Good evening, listeners and viewers. I wanted to check actually whether Tuheyo represents the interests of Luke in NRM or of George Musi as an individual in NRM.
Well,
I pay taxes to NRM. So
How do you pay to the government of Uganda, boss?
NRM and government.
as the show progresses, we'll be able to know, because some of the things we are going to look at, you're actually hinting on them. Also in studio, Dr. James Tuheyo, member of the NRM Central Executive Committee representing workers, just walked in from the NRM Parliamentary Caucus. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, all listeners and viewers, and good evening, friends in the studio.
Are we doing the mergers or not?
Oh, why not? We are doing it.
Because that's what was in the caucus today. Give us an update.
We are doing it. In the caucus, we are doing a great job, because we are looking at concentrating all the efforts and resources of government so that we are able to deliver to the people. And we are going to merge most of these MDAs, although we are going to give a margin of transition for some one or two MDAs, especially Uganda Coffee Development Authority, to give comfort and confidence to those who are worried. And we are looking at the possibility of extending some time for NITA-U, because there are projects which they are working on, especially extending the backbone for internet everywhere. And you know, internet has been one of the greatest tools for mobilization, one of the greatest tools for information. And I'm very comfortable, my brother, when he said I'm representing his interests, when he hears that we are now going to make sure that internet reaches every parish, he must be one of the most comfortable people, because it's one of the tools that work for mobilization and information.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Dr. Sohail should know
today
that,
we'll be focusing
the
on
Minister of ICT promised us free internet 5 years ago.
Actually, it did work. That internet in the city did work.
What happened?
No. If you remember, George, as part of GCIC, the effort that we put up, it did work in the city, but it proved to be expensive to have that free internet in the city. And again, like Doctor has mentioned, this is one way that this will happen. And you should give them credit. First of all, the internet, the tariffs went down.
Really?
Yes.
Where?
Yes. No. The tariffs actually in Uganda. Yes, in Uganda. They went really down.
Absolutely.
Yes. So it's been. They've actually made efforts. They did make efforts to make sure that
the project is ongoing. So certainly the costs will go lowest as we proceed. Yes.
All right. Well, today our topic will be looking at the unending challenges of governance in our country. And of course, we know next month we will be making 62 years as an independent nation. From that time, we have had actually 9 heads of state. We have had a history that has been challengeful. And out of the 9 heads of state, we have had President Yoweri Museveni, who is the longest serving, 40 years in power after this particular term. Some people say he's not slowing down. As long as his party is okay with it, and as long as he's healthy, he might keep on running because we have no presidential age limits. Then we also have issues that we need to contend with. There are debates around our political parties. There are debates around how the government treats those in opposition, those who are providing the alternatives. There are issues to do with our elections. Some people think it's a mere, ritual, which we do after 5 years. And there's a big debate about our progress in terms of democracy and how we can actually improve the situation. So today, we want to reflect on some of these issues and see how we can actually better them. And that's why we have this broader discussion about governance and democracy in our country. And I want Mr. Job Kija to give us a lead because of the analysis you've done recently, which you named Uganda Governance Trends Analysis Tracker, an analysis of the key developments, events, and trends in Uganda's governance since after the last elections. The reason this is important is because we are actually preparing for another round or cycle of elections. From your analysis, what do you see? Are we moving in the right direction as a country when it comes to issues of governance? Are we doing it the right way?
Thank you, Kenneth. Now, of course, when you look at the governance trajectory for Uganda, and considering the analysis that we have done, you can clearly see that there are a number of challenges that we are facing, whereby a country that has been independent for, is it 63 years now?
62 will be
62 years. Should actually be at a different level. We seem to be actually backtracking, because if you look at the key ingredients of governance, you realize that we are performing not so well on a number of them. Now, usually we look at our democracy in terms of elections. If you look at the conduct of elections in this country, every 5 years we are conducting elections, which ideally you'd say that we are building a democratic culture, whereby, yes, you're conducting elections, which is a welcome and important ingredient of democratization. But the quality of elections that we are having seems to be going down every successive election. Why do I say that? If you look at, I think, let's look at since the 1995 Constitution was promulgated, every election that we have had has actually been contested in one way or the other. Why? Because of the process that it goes through. Violence has become a common fixture of all the elections that we have been having. And every 5 years, I think we did a study in 2019, which was predicting that the 2021 elections were going to be violent. And in that study, we are pointing out that every election that we have had, the violence that has been in that election has actually not been resolved. So every successive election that happens inherits violence from the past election. Now, what we didn't foresee then was that there was actually going to be a new form of violence in the 2021 elections. Now, I think for those of us that have observed the 2021 election, we realize that the violence that happened then is actually still recurring up to now. Look at, my colleague friend George Musisi is always in the court martial trying to get the release of the members of NUP that up to now are still being locked up, political prisoners that were arrested prior to the election. Now, abductions. I think this is the first election where we had abductions happening. It was a new, unique form of violence that was actually being experienced in terms of our elections. This is the first time that we had broad daylight shootings on the streets. 54 plus bodies dead on the streets. So we actually, from the analysis that we have done, we see this kind of violence being carried over to the next elections, and we don't see the institutions that are responsible for addressing this actually doing enough to deal with this. We are looking at political parties. Political parties are an important player in the elections. How are they organized? When we do our analysis, you realize that, yes, in terms of the ruling party, and because of the advantage that it has in terms of access to state structures, the legroom that it has to use different resources available from the budget and different places, yes, they are doing a lot in terms of organizing. Other political parties are also trying amidst a lot of challenges that they are facing. You find that even institutions that should actually be trying to help them to maneuver the murky waters of democracy, as instead impeding them. The Electoral Commission, I think to date, the new constitution of the National Unity Platform has not been gazetted by the Electoral Commission because of some funny technicality. Maybe George Musizi here will help us explain that. But you wonder, if a party is trying to put in place systems to help it improve its corporate governance, why is the Electoral Commission impeding that progress? You look at NUP filed, I think it was Robert Chagulanyi, who filed a petition in the Electoral Commission. It took in the Human Rights Commission. It took 3 years plus for that Electoral Commission, for that petition to be heard. When they went for the hearing, the manner in which they were treated could actually show that this is a Human Rights Commission that is supposed to be protecting the rights of these actors that have run to it, but that is instead actually participating in shrinking its rights. We have had statements not even just attributed. We have heard the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission speaking on camera about the abductees, the people that are still missing. NUP is still reporting that their people, since the 2021 elections, are still missing. And then the Human Rights Commission chairperson gets on a national platform and says these are cooked up stories. Someone who should be investigating to actually find out what is happening. If you look at a number of other political parties, we have about 26 political parties that are registered with the Electoral Commission. Only 9 of them are active. The question is, what about the other 17 political parties? What are they doing in terms of preparation for the next elections? If you look at the activity that these different political parties are engaged in, you will find that it is mainly 3 parties that are actually active. That is NRM, NUP, and FDC. If you see what is happening in NUP and FDC, no, it is NRM, NUP, and FDC. If you DP, yes, DP is active within NRM because we know that, and that's another interesting element whereby the NRM, as part of its consolidation, has been trying to co-opt different political parties.
DP and UPC.
DP and UPC. Of course, now I heard the President General of DP saying that he's going to contest in the next elections as the president of DP. Now, this is the first time I'm hearing someone saying that I'm going to contest against my boss in the next election. So we wonder whether he's going to come as on what platform he's going to come. But anyway, the point I'm making is that if you look at the political parties, the manner in which they are organized, we are really not sure, because if you look at the analysis, we are not sure whether these parties are actually really preparing for the elections or not. In terms of NUP, you can clearly see that there's internal contradictions that are also could potentially affect its fortunes in the next election, but also there are external factors that are affecting the extent to which it can organize. We have seen their political activities, mobilization rallies being quelled by the police. We have seen the hostility from the Human Rights Commission, I need to say, and other security forces. We have 7, now there are actually 8 new applications to contest, to register as political parties, including the Katonga faction, People's Front for Freedom, which also apply to compete. In the next elections, we probably will have maybe close to 40 parties that are up and running. The question is, how many of these are going to competently field candidates or even compete in the next elections? Fast forward, look at Parliament, the manner in which Parliament is exercising its mandate. Parliament as an institution has first of all lost credibility. If you look at this analysis, why? Look at the expose of the excesses of Parliament through the parliamentary exhibition. Now we are hearing of the service award. This has brought out that Parliament as an institution that is no longer appearing as credible enough in the public domain to even be able to exercise its oversight function effectively. If you look at the March to Parliament wasn't just some riffraffs that were, last week, was it this week or last week, where we had some nude protesters that were marching to Parliament. These are not idle people. They have messages which they are sending across. And I think the most important message that is being sent across through this March of Parliament is a loss of confidence by the public in the institution of Parliament. if you look at Parliament itself as an institution, it is contradicting its own rules of procedure. We have had 2 landmark exercises or processes whereby the different arms of government have actually themselves cast doubt on the extent to which Parliament is functioning as an institution. If you look at the Zake, the case, the removal of Zake from being a parliamentary commissioner, you saw the ruling of the Constitutional Court, which actually ruled that by the deputy speaker then, who is now the speaker, presiding over the motion to remove Zake from being a parliamentary commissioner, she was conflicted, and that in itself nullified the decision of Parliament. The censure of Passes Namuganza, Parliament comes up, the censure Passes Namuganza over YouTube videos, and then fast forward, the president says that, you know what, you go back and do your work. I think for me, this overruling of parliamentary decisions through the different arms of government also is an expose of the diminished confidence of the other arms of government in the institution of Parliament. Right. Let's look at 2 additional things maybe as we proceed.
Very quickly.
One, if you look at the actions that led to the censure of these 2 individuals, the removal of Zake and the removal of Namuganza, it was because of their exposure of their displeasure of a certain individual in the August House. The August House participates in processes to push back against these individuals that are expressing their displeasure with an individual. What does that tell? That tells you that individual members of Parliament are actually themselves showing a vote of no confidence in their leadership. Fast forward, when you look at the censure motion by Honorable Sechkubo and others that want to censure the commissioners, it also shows you that actually these MPs that have signed, how many signed? 100 plus? 186 MPs signing a censure motion of their leaders of Parliament also shows that members of Parliament themselves have actually diminished levels of confidence in their leadership. So I think for me these are important factors that need to be looked into as we head to the next elections.
All right, I'll give you enough time so that you could...
I want to just talk about one final thing.
All right.
One final thing. Let's look at the numbers. If you look at the numbers, the NRM went through, all these parties are saying that they are registering their members. Okay? The NRM went through a robust exercise to register their members. What did they come back with? They came back with 18.3 million members on their register. You look at the Electoral Commission register, they have 18.1 million registered voters.
NUP also did registration.
You look at NUP, let me get to that. You look at NUP, and NUP, we checked your website. We don't know what the current status is. You could be having more members. But what they had was 12 million registered members. Before you go to FDC, DP, no, there's actually FDC Katonga, there's FDC Najanankumbi. Before you go to DP, UPC, and DP Block, JEMA, all these others, between just 2 political parties, that is NUP and NRM, you have 30 million voters, members that they have. No, it is more than the adult voting population or the adult population that can vote, because the adult population that can vote, as per the recent returns from the UBOS, is 22.7 million. So there are 7-point-something million ghosts in these 2 registers.
People registered twice.
So these numbers, we need to look into them as we head into the next election.
We need to
and what do they mean for us?
We need to go for a break, but remember also they have been registering people who are 16 years old. Therefore,
it doesn't matter.
They might not be automatically voters now, but maybe voters in future. But let's go for a break. When we return, we'll start breaking down these issues that you've put across, because you've touched so many things: the political environment, you've looked at the elections, you've looked at institutions, you've looked at political parties. So we would like to open up and look at them as issues to do with the governance of our country, but also with a historical perspective. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, but keep your comments coming by the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. All right, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Xtra live on Radio 1 FM 90. Today, we are looking at the unending challenges in our governance systems in our country. I have a panel of 4. Dr. James Tweheyo, member of the NRM Central Executive Committee, where he represents workers. Mr. Job Kija, governance expert, author of the latest Uganda Trends Analysis Tracker. He works for Innovations for Democratic Engagement and Action. Mr. George Musisi, lawyer at the National Unity Platform Party, and His Worship Fabrice Rulinda, the mayor of Entebbe Municipality. Fabrice, we've heard from Job giving us some sort of analysis of the issues that we should be looking at seriously as we prepare even for the next elections. Not forgetting the fact that as a country we are 62 years old, and the fact that we need to be doing better than what we are today.
Thank you, Kenneth. I'm going to take a different direction from my brother Job and ask that we have this conversation as Ugandans and not as political parties, but a sober conversation about the direction and future of our country. 62 years. When you sent me the notes, I saw again something that always bothers me. Mr. Museveni, this and that. We need to start thinking of our country from a general direction. I love what Job has just put across, and not individualize where the problem is, but look at it from a sober and realistic point of view. 62 years. If 62 years, if it was a person, this is an old man. We are no longer a young country. We are no longer a young democracy. We are no longer a young nation. We are now an old nation that needs to be doing better. The loss of confidence in the institutions is very blatant. It's clear for everybody to see. We have almost all levels of society that are failing. And this, instead of looking at it from a realistic point of view, we want to blame it on a particular party or particular individuals. Let me give you an example. We had this Kitezi saga that happened. People died. As a nation, up to today, we are running around and skirting around the issue and not looking at the fact that we had people who died in 2024 who died from garbage. Nobody has taken responsibility. No one has been penalized for this. Life has gone on. We're talking about a country whose missions are being closed down, ambassadors being deported, and we are talking that we are a nation. That our sovereignty, to a point where they put your ambassador on a plane, he comes back home, and nobody has come out to say we need to wake up as a nation. 62 years old, we're still talking about issues of failure to have medicine. We talk about people starving. We need to wake up as a country. This is not a Museveni thing. We need to stop blaming the president over every single thing. It's failing right from the LC1 chairman in your village, who still asks you for 20,000 shillings to put a stamp on a piece of paper. It's failing right from the fact that even our leaders, because the Chistezi thing I'm talking about is one that should have attracted people to run, find a solution that is lasting. Instead of discussing, we are sending garbage to Entebbe, we are sending it to Mukono, we are sending it to, because we are not actually finding a solution.
But even the people of Entebbe are not helping. They are throwing back the garbage.
No, we had to send it back. I know I knew you would bring that up. But I couldn't solve a crisis by creating another one in Entebbe. So there's no way I can get to the entrance of the country that much garbage that's coming from Kampala. But let's go back to governance. 62 years down the road.
Wouldn't you treat that as a governance issue? The issue
it is. It is, and that's what I started with. That's why I mentioned it. It is a failure it's a failure in governance for us to say that we can have people die, whether 2, 3, 4, 5. In other countries, a citizen's death is taken very seriously. In ours, it's a by the way. It is something that people get over and move on the next day. We need to have a sober conversation, NUP, FDC, NRM, before we talk elections, before we talk politicking. Where did we go wrong? What is the quality of our today? Because you see, we keep talking about the politicians, and we forget that the people running this country are technocrats. What is the quality of the technocrats that we have? If we can have someone being kicked out for turning an embassy into a casino, 62 years old, we're still talking about issues of failure to have medicine. We talk about people starving. It's failing right from the fact that even our leaders, because the Chistezi thing I'm talking about is one that should have attracted people to run, find a solution that is lasting. Instead of discussing, we are if we can have someone being deported, what does that say of us as a country? What is our immigration like? What is our police like? So before we go and politic with this, can we focus and say, where did we go wrong as a country? I think that's the better conversation that we would be having, to say at 62 years old. No one in this room, I don't know, Doctor, are you 62 yet?
Oh, no, not yet.
Okay, so nobody in this room is even 62, but our country is 62.
But am I allowed to ask you? I want to ask you who appoints these technocrats. The people have been thrown out from Dubai and Canada. Who appointed them?
And again,
if you're appointing competent people, you still
again that conversation. You see, do these people go through the vetting? Escapism is one of the biggest problems that we have today. No, yes, and that's what I'm saying. Escapism is part of the problem. The fact that we want to point fingers without actually at individuals. Because guess what? If I send you Lukwago for vetting, you approve and pass Lukwago goes and does Manyanga. Okay? You can't just blame me who appointed him. Take responsibility. What I'm saying is, as a country, today, we all, in our small capacities, from where you are, what are you doing to make a difference in the country? What are you actually doing? Because I saw Lukwago teasing me about the garbage, the pushing, but I did it not for Fabrice. I don't own that land in Ngumba. I did it for the nation and what it would look like to have that garbage in Entebbe. So, in your small capacity, what are you doing? All right. Uganda is ours, not one person's, and one person can't fix the country. We need to understand that we all have a responsibility. We have a duty to this country to fix it.
I want to disagree with
Let's hear from Dr. Tweheyo. I'll give you an opportunity for a rebuttal. Dr. Tweheyo, what's your reading of this situation, issues of governance? Mr. Rulida has chosen to take a completely different path from the issues that Joe put on the table.
One way or another, I would agree with him. Both parties, my brother Job and Mr. Rulida. But before that, I want first of all to extend my sympathies to those who started from Namasagali. Our old friend Father Grimes have gone to be with the Lord. Our sister, this good runner, Chiptage, lost her life. And my good brother, my young brother, Chaguranyi, after going through a Miri, having visited my brother here, my friend, I had that injury of the leg. I extend my sympathy. He's a human being, and really nobody should enjoy the suffering and pain of any individual. So I want to clearly mention that. Yes, we are talking about democracy. We are talking about the conduct and quality of the processes. But we are all Ugandans, as my brother said. What is it that we have done right, and what is it that we have done wrong that we need to correct? Is it in all circumstances that the ruling party is the one that is on the wrong side? Or is it on the right side always? In many cases, we have all made our mistakes, and we must admit that. Remember, all institutions are made of people. Today, when we were in the caucus, we had one of the interesting fears when we were saying that these institutions should be merged. Their worry was, if they go to the ministries, a number of public servants in the ministries are not active to engage and do the work well the way these MDAs have been doing it. But we also looked at the other side and said, well, these people in the ministries were sleeping because all the resources and literally the work was taken by these MDAs, which were fairly remunerated. So some of these issues, we need to look at both sides and say, where did we go wrong? Political parties. Political parties are a vehicle because all of them are struggling for one thing, to capture power, get the resources with which they think they can use to work for the people. And I think that's the interest. But then when you look at the operations and the way they do things, we may be the same, although some may be better than the others. So, where is the problem? 60 years later, or 62 years later for that matter, when I've been independent, what is it that can be done to improve our democratic processes. And by the way, you are talking of violence and all that. Let me tell you, situations change. And because of these changes in situations, we need to understand the dynamics of the politics and be able to handle them. The young people now form the majority. But what is the guarantee that if the young people are given power, they will do better than what we call the old guards? Let me tell you, at the moment, Parliament has the biggest majority of the young people, this current Parliament. Why did my brother condemn it as the least performing? You look at the data of Parliament. And he himself, in his own words, said, Parliament now is, but it is full of the young people. Most of them in the ranges of between 25 and 45. And those young people. So what is it? We need to understand the dynamics now of the current society. When we talk to, for example, of the internet, when we talk of the media, when we talk of information, when we talked of the changes in development, long ago, somebody would come and say, my manifesto is to fight poverty, to fight ignorance, to fight disease. But now it is no longer the case. Because most of these young people you are talking are no longer ignorant. Actually, most of them, by the way, wherever they're coming from, they're educated, they're elites. Most of them are on social media. And in any case, some of them inform, others entertain, others, in an attempt to entertain, they falsify information. And that's where sometimes the problem comes from. So what is it then that we can do to make sure that we inform, we educate, we share the same values as a country, to make sure that what we want, all of us, can be done genuinely with the outfit of the democracy we want? Yes, this time it is no longer as easy as it used to be for somebody to tell a lie that on this particular station somebody has earned 20 votes. It is no longer possible. You can easily tell before they even finish the counting, somebody they are counting when he has you on the mirror. So this kind of information sharing would be the best in the situation. And then 62 years later, when this country has been through all these transitions, it is not as easy as people may want to think. Because quite a number of people, especially other parties, think that now Uganda has enough resources and therefore could have done better. Let me tell you, we have come from a distance. Those who were in UPUSE are now the ones, the leaders.
All right.
The other day when I was talking about my brother, the leader of opposition, he has grown through this. He was here, he was in the radio, he was in the TV, he has grown through it and he knows what it is. But at the moment, he is the leader of opposition.
All right.
He has grown through the same system, through the government. All right. And by the way, protected by the same forces of government. So, if they can protect him as a leader of opposition and he comfortably criticizes it, why do you think that the same government should be killing its own people?
All right. Let's hear from Mr. George Musisi from the NUP. What's your reading of the situation?
Well, if you're talking about governance and you're talking about the 60-plus years of independence, you should contextualize that almost 40 of that time has been under the same chief executive.
I did mention that.
Well, I'm giving my opinion.
All right.
I've not taken your credit.
I sympathize with my good friend Fabrice. I had him diagnosing all the right things, the right problems. Then he apportioned the wrong medicine. He said, we have actually, Fabrice just stopped short of saying we have a dysfunctional government. We have a total breakdown. He
didn't mention that.
The burying of over 30 people by rubbish, a heap of rubbish burying people alive, is a symptom, is symptomatic of everything that has gone wrong. And Fabrice says, no, we don't blame everything on the president. In modern management, the buck stops with the chief executive. Some of you, like Anderson, who is a football fan, you know that if they are blaming you for poor results, you cannot say, no, the kit manager brings the kits late, or the physiotherapist, or what. The buck stops with the chief executive. Sometime back, over 10 years ago, and I'm giving an example of governance, in 2010, 2011, President Museveni had a problem with the way local government was running this city. In fact, I remember him saying he gave an example of rubbish that when I'm in State House in Nakasero, 7 as KCCA, I get the flies from the rubbish in KCCA. And he was trying to justify the takeover of the central executive, of the central government by the city. And we even had to go through a law. We appointed an authority, an ED, and put in place a structure, which put the city under his office. And even then, I argued that, do we have an example of this executive which is talking about the city, of very good managing principles elsewhere? He has a problem. Many times he diagnoses things with the army, saying the army takes over agriculture, the army takes over immigration, the army takes over. But don't we have lots of scandals in the army? So when we relate to the governance issues, what were the problems in the past? The problems of the past were issues with the rule of law, issues of elections, issues of governance. And indeed, the first years of this government, they diagnosed the problems. President Museveni even put it in writing. They went through a painstaking process of delivering to Uganda a constitution, hoping to put us on a road to constitutionalism. Now, and the NRM government delivered a very fantastic piece of paper, which comprised of our national consensus, called the 1995 Constitution. And for so long, we're on a good track. That what that constitution did was, one, put in place structures, institutions, because it's a good feature of good governance to have stronger institutions than stronger individuals. To put in place checks and balances, we put in place the judiciary to have checks. We put in place structures saying that the armed forces should not engage in partisan politics, and so on. We put in place regular, free and fair democratic elections.
Everything is good in the constitution.
All those were envisaged. Now, years later, after this constitution has, first of all, it has almost lost its shape. It has lost its shape because the fundamental pillars of that constitution were what the problems of the past were having a very strong almost imperial presidency, where you have all the powers constituted in the presidency. The first fundamental pillar to fall off that constitution was the removal of term limits in 2005. And later,
Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Xtra, live on Radio 1 FM 90. My name is Kenneth Lukwagandason, your host. I have a panel of 4, Dr. James Tweheyo, Mr. Job Kija, Mr. George Musisi, and his worship Fabrice Rulinda. But I also have you, dear listener, who is following closely to this discussion, and a number of you have already shared comments, and I'll read through them before we actually move on to look at the issues that are being discussed. I'll begin with Mawa Jacob Amaza, who is listening in from Moyo in West Nile. Thank you very much for tuning in. It says, let the opposition forget about change if President Yoweri Museveni is still in power. Unless if the opposition forms a coalition, then get one leader. The rest should go and organize the voters in their respective constituencies. Then NRM can become history. How can someone win when Mr. Museveni is the one appointing the chairman of the Electoral Commission and the Chief Justice? Did anyone win elections during late Arap Moi in Kenya? No. Imagine someone winning 92% of elections. That's African democracy. Then we have Drani, who writes and says, Radio 1, politics and the elections in Uganda have been turned by Museveni to eating table. It's where Mr. Museveni appoints people and called elected people to come and join him to feed on the sweat of others. They know Ugandans, they have Ugandans as security for borrowing and stealing all their loans to build their small individual businesses. Nobody now cares for Ugandans, but all politicians look at this country as a means to easily lavish their lives. All this was caused by Mr. Museveni's greed, and he caps it up by saying, shame. That's a comment coming in from Brani. Then Anthony writes and said, I hate fake preaching or trying to get a sympathy vote. Why did the opposition parties, including NUP, boycott parliamentary sittings in Gulu? We need an answer about that. Are we really one as Uganda? The opposition parties are so sentimental in their speech and aggressive. We don't want aggressive leaders. We only want a progressive leader in our country. We have another comment. In July this year, Venezuela held elections. President Maduro, after losing the election, aided by the army, he overturned the results as to continue as the president. I see what has happened in Venezuela happening in Uganda in 2026. Kauma Digo, listening again from Mitiana. Fabrice raises a fundamental issue. Where did we go wrong as a country? Our country went to the dogs the day we chose to remove term limits from the constitution and pave way for life presidency. Today, the governance is not about service delivery, but safeguarding, promoting, and maintaining political dynasty. To achieve this, we have recruited incompetent cadres into all arms of the government that can never question the powers that be. Behold, our country is in trouble. That is a comment coming in from Alan in Tungamo. Gentlemen, you heard the feedback from the listeners. Is at that point when we start isolating these issues. Let's begin with the political environment, and I'll begin with you, George Musisi. As NUP, how have you found the political environment? Does it augur well? Does it provide the foundation for us to grow the democracy?
Of course, in 2005/6, when we went into multipartism, there were amendments to our laws to cater for multipartism, and it was envisaged that it would be an environment where political parties contest in a political contest. Years down the road, we can review and note that actually the NRM government doesn't have any good intentions of creating a political environment for multipartism to play. Earlier, Job, and it could have been a joke, but it's sad, talked about the predatory nature, and predatory is my word, of NRM, where you have,
It's called wooing.
No, you for the first time, you have a leader of an opposition party in cabinet, sitting in parliament, and his members are sitting the other side in opposition. And that is how funny it looks. That you have a DP President General sitting in cabinet. And you know what cabinet means? The Constitution says that if you're a cabinet minister, you are bound by the collective responsibility and the decisions of... You are basically implementing an NRM manifesto.
You have the opportunity to influence the decisions of cabinet.
Well, you are a member of cabinet, and you're a member of implementing the NRM program. So, and that is just you have a political party like the FDC, which now we have two factions, and they are breaking up because they are saying there is some money which came from the other side. And we've had all those other parties being factions. Even in
the service award.
Of course, even in the service award, the caucus that Dr. Krohe was attending, there was a member of NUP who attended today. So there's a member of...
Not as a spy?
No, he was invited.
So now that makes up for that number that you were talking about.
So what I'm saying is that, one, there is, first of all...
You are saying that Tuheyo is the only one who represents your interest. The other side...
So you were in the caucus too.
So the issue is that cooperation between parties ordinarily should not be criminal. The only difference here is that the NRM doesn't cooperate for purposes of the national interest. It cooperates to actually co-opt you and actually possibly dismantle you.
There's a listener who talked about the need for the opposition to actually cooperate. And even
which opposition? That's the question. Which opposition? Because just like President Museveni has already said many times, there are even people he calls good DP and bad DP. Recently was addressing SEC, and Dr. Tuheyo is not the one who was not the my ears in SEC. But I'm told you said, Honorable Mpoka is not like these bad people who are always blackmailing us. So there are some...
When you are putting your country first, then you should be considered good. And
I actually wish they were putting the country first. It's actually always... let me give you an example of the President General of DP. When he was joining our cabinet, he said, we are going to discuss transition and bring you constitutional amendment.
They're still discussing.
Which national dialogue. You can talk about 3 years down the road, and you can ask how far he has gone down that road. So the issue is that the political environment of multipartism, there is no good faith. You look at the freedoms of association and assembly. Right now, it's almost criminal for the bad opposition party. I'm using bad, quote unquote, because the good ones will always meet. They will meet and cheer. Just recently, when National Unity Platform was having its tours, police said no. It even came up with extra legal requirements for it. But in the same week, you could see that there are some opposition parties which we are having parades in towns. Fabrice's PLU even made a parade in this town from Lugogo all up Old Kampala, right in the middle of town. So the issue is that it's not about parties doing what they're supposed to do. The environment, the law, and having the security agencies. Dr. Trujillo earlier talked about the ugly incident that happened to my party president this week, a few days ago in my backyard, where you have police unprovoked unleashing terror on citizens only because they are belonging to a different political outfit. So the issue of security agencies thinking that they are part of the armed wing of the political party and engaging in partisan politics for the purposes of opposing, I think it's bad for politics. And I think the political environment is, and that's why I said initially that we are back to the same problems, the same governance issues that bedeviled us before the Constitution. And when we come to a selective implementation of the law, where the same institutions which are supposed to enforce the law, the same people are supposed to be non-partisan, are putting on political outfits for purposes of defeating political opponents, I think it's very bad for our politics.
All right, Mr. Trujillo, the political environment.
Yeah, you know, when we go into democracies and, of course, politics, we are first all together, not only NRM, but all other parties, we have a duty to endear ourselves to the population in order to be elected. That's the greatest challenge for everybody. Now, the question is, how do we get this done? As government, the duty to endear ourselves to the population is service delivery. If in Kampala all roads are worked, like we're planning to have 300 kilometers done, people will say, oh yes, you have worked. But another person who will look at that as something that is going to give you an edge over the other group will look for a way to make sure that he equally endears himself or herself to the other population. So that becomes a big challenge. Now, how do we strike a balance? Should one say, okay, they have worked, let me give in and leave them? That's the question. That is why we have skirmishes a number of times. Because if I see you're going to have an advantage over me for doing right, possibly, you know, as you remember those at the university, how they used to do it, possibly I would put a smear campaign. I'm not saying we do it, but there is that likelihood that somebody may put
at this level, should we be following the laws or actually doing smear campaigns?
Even within the funny way
malice.
of lying behind the law, Cromwell said you must hide behind the law in order to protect yourself. So sometimes they take advantage of hiding behind the law to make sure that they do what they think will endear themselves to the population, what I may call populism, in the different way altogether. So every other person would want to be popular. Every other party would want to be popular. How they do it, that's the question number one. In multipartism, how do we get this done without necessarily injuring the processes and the intentions for which we are seeking power? Every person who seeks power wants to control resources, to get the power and control resources specifically for service delivery. And that is what we are now insisting on.
But I think there are laws in place that govern the political processes, and there should be fairness.
But those laws...
You should allow others to do what you are also doing. If you're doing rallies, those on the other side should also be allowed to do so.
A rally is not service delivery. A rally is actually the populism that one is trying to make in order to endear himself or herself to the public, in order to dislodge you or in order to be given an opportunity to get that position. So in this case, I'm talking about what is it then that we need to do as Ugandans to ensure that we go to compete and somebody wins and another one loses with comfort. Because anybody who wants to come in will do everything possible, and that is what is actually instigating violence. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I want you to know that violence is not a preserve of other parties. Even in our own internal elections, you have seen it happen. Mm-hmm. There is that violence. Why? Because the people who are coming up, their intention in most cases is not necessarily to serve, but to make sure that they service themselves.
All right.
That is why we have issues in parliament. That's why we have issues in local government. That is why even now some manifest it before they reach. That is why even within the parties themselves, you find a number of challenges. People within the party, with the little resources they have in their parties, fighting over those resources because they want to service themselves. Now, the challenge that we have in this country now is we have developed a culture of them and we.
Thank you.
Whether it's in the church, whether it's in the mosque, whether it is in the parties, there is a question of saying those, even, by the way, even in my own party, in NRM, there are some that say those ones are the favored. Even I am very sure in NUP, I'm very sure in DP, I'm sure in all those. That is why you see those squabbles, and that explains actually the major
Why
squabbles.
did you point DP to Job?
No.
He just pointed.
I just
DP is there.
From Fabrice.
So friends, those issues need to be looked at realistically. I think in this panel, we are the elites. We are the most understanding. I'm not saying the most, but among the reasonable people in this country. And we should look at things realistically so that we are fair to ourselves, but we are also fair to our citizens and the country. The electorate elects the people who they think will forward their interest. If I talk about poverty, I'm not talking about NOPE, I'm not talking about FDC, I'm talking about I'm saying that there is a layer of people in Uganda who have not access to resources the way they should be, and therefore the government in place should put a mechanism to take care of them like it has done now by putting issues like PDM, by putting issues like Emyoga, in order for everybody to be included within the systems of resource.
All right. We have a comment coming in from Betty, listening in from Kamocha. I don't know if he understood you clearly, Mr. Fabrice. He says, I agree with Fabrice. Blame game takes us nowhere. Someone has to be accountable. When an NGO is not delivering the donor, the donor country, the director is answerable. It's simple logic. Let's agree that the head is tired, old and played out. A fish will always rot from the head. That's a comment there, Betty listening in from Kamocha. We have another comment here. Good evening, Spectrum Extra. Lawrence from Entebbe, please help me educate Fabrice that in management there is what we call the right chart or model. It stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Several people can be responsible, consulted, and informed. However, only one person can be held accountable, and this is usually the boss. Therefore, President Museveni is the only person who is supposed to be held accountable for all the bad things in this country. This is standard management model used everywhere in the world. Fabrice, let's hear from you on the issue of the political environment.
Let me first respond to the gentleman from Entebbe who wants me educated.
That's your voter.
I want him to understand something.
That's your voter.
Even in management, yes, the CEO heads the organization, but there's a reason that they fire certain people for not delivering.
Who fires them?
They could actually be a board. In this case, the board is asked the voters.
Which is on top of the CEO.
Yes, and in Uganda, power belongs to the people. Yes, sir. So, guess what? You see, then you see the things. I am now beginning to think my brother Job is. I'm now beginning to think my brother Job is his presentations are academic, are not realistic in these discussions.
Because being academic.
When we talk, you see, like I said,
which people?
Like I said, if we're going to have this conversation, let's be realistic and sober about it. We can come here, okay, and every day repeat the same thing. I have had this discussion with you here, Anderson, so many times. As long as we're still blaming one individual and not bringing other people to take responsibility for their action, you find that there is a mayor that's not performing.
But Fabrice,
let me finish.
Fabrice,
there is a mayor that's not performing.
Fabrice.
He's re-elected over and over again. But guess what? It is still Museveni's fault that he's not performing. There is a person that is robbing coffers, okay? There is a service commission, but we are still saying Museveni is to blame. There is an LC1 chairperson in the village. You know he's a land thief. You know he's the one who steals everything. And guess what? The village still votes for that same LC1 every time. Again, Museveni is the problem. Let's start from the best.
The voters may be the accomplices.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying. We as a people.
All right. Let's
we as a people.
On the political environment.
Yes, and that's what I'm talking about. We as a people need to take responsibility. You talked about that vote that you cast. You start with the basic thing as your chairman in the village.
Let me ask you one question, Fabrice.
And you think
Fabrice,
no, the elite don't vote. That is actually the funny part.
And I mobilize people to vote.
The elite actually, majority of the elite, I call them clickivists. I call them clickivists. They spend their time on social media, clicking and talking all the big game. when it comes to the reality of doing things. My border man, the fisherman in Chigungu, my guy in Lugonjo, those are the ones that vote. Okay? And they are fed with whatever is being thrown out there. That's why he mentioned that with every single election year, what we are producing in Parliament is laughable. Okay? And why? Again, you can't blame Museveni for bringing those people into your Parliament. They are the ones who are setting the laws. They are the ones who are vetting these people that we're sending to foreign missions. We need to say, as a country, can we say that we are taking responsibility of our country? Because
we can't.
You see, Fabrice,
let me say something.
Let me make this disclaimer.
I allowed the job to speak.
Fabrice,
he's not doing that.
Let me make this clear disclaimer.
If we continue like that, the discussion will be between Job and Fabrice.
Kenneth, let me make this disclaimer. I don't want the listeners to believe that every other person who is in Parliament is chaff.
No.
We really have a number of sensible, if not most of them, who are sensible and reasonable and are representing their constituencies and people. So I don't want us to take it for granted that Parliament really is a bogus institution. Let us be clear on this.
Urania who said, Urania who said there are young people in Parliament and
Yes,
you see what they are doing.
They are
So now
young
you're
people.
contradicting
No,
yourself.
I'm not contradicting myself. There are a number of young people who are not performing. That's the truth. But not everybody in Parliament is not performing.
No, we didn't
Right,
actually,
Ali,
no one actually said that.
Why is it that all the time when people are doing analysis about the performance of Parliament, they're always pointing to the 6th Parliament and saying the only useful Parliament we had in this country was the 6th Parliament?
Incidentally, the 6th Parliament didn't perform to its best because it is the very same Parliament that was preventing the construction of dams. And if you can remember, at the time when the Honorable Saida Bumba was the minister, that was the time when we faced the highest level of power shutdowns. It is the same 6th Parliament which had rejected, actually, the raising of the funds for works, for Ministry of Works, for the construction of roads, if you can remember. So sometimes you would say it performed its best according to those who were saying they should. You see, some people look at Parliament as an institution that should resist all the advances of the executive. But that 6th Parliament had its own issues. If the president had not been firm on it, by this time I can tell you, would not be having sufficient power even to light the bulbs in this city.
Right, let's hear a job on the political environment, because that's where we are.
Yeah, when you're looking at performance of Parliament, Parliament has 3 core roles. One is legislation. The other is representation. The third is oversight. Now, when you look at the way they are exercising these different roles, you need to be asking the question, what is the quality, or to what extent is Parliament exercising these different responsibilities? If you look at the question of oversight and you look at this particular Parliament, I think I would want to ask you, because oversight, they should be checking mainly the executive. Okay, so to what extent, if you look at supplementary budgets that are being thrown in Parliament, okay, and I think we have a problem of a burgeoning budget, which is largely actually inflated by supplementaries. I think this last budget, we had about 17 trillion being smuggled in even after being spent. So you look at a budget of that nature and you wonder, and Parliament accepts it and passes it. So what quality of Parliament are you then having in that regard? If you look at the manner in which Parliament itself is behaving and playing around with taxpayers' money, a Parliament of that nature clearly has lost credibility to even say that we can hold the executive accountable if they themselves are actually being accused of indulgence in corruption. And there are vivid examples. Now, I want to get back to the point which Fabrice was making about, if these individuals are not performing to the extent that they are supposed to be performing, a commission is not performing, should we blame that on the executive? And I wanted to ask you, Fabrice, it has happened, okay? What do you want the people to do, the citizens to do right now? It has happened, people died, over 30 people died. Just 30?
35.
35 people died. over 30 people died, okay? Over 100 homes were buried in rubbish. What do you want the voter in Kitezi to do, in Nasa and the neighboring areas? What do you want them to do? Who is supposed to be taking responsibility for that and maybe making some heads roll in Kitezi? Is it the citizen? What can a citizen whose home has been buried, what can they do?
All right, let's hear from you on the political environment.
Yeah, so generally, if you look at the political environment, the challenge we are facing now is that, yes, we are getting actually into the heat of the elections, actually, I can say, the campaigns. You see, as debating with my friend here about PLU, you can see PLU is actually doing its mobilization on the ground. They have appointed, we are talking about NRM appointing PLU members within its government, but PLU is actually appointing government officials in its structures. General Thacheng is the coordinator for Langosa region. So we are seeing PLU actually going on the ground. Perhaps I can see. Of Entebbe municipality. So we are seeing PLU actually. I don't know whether I should call it gaining ground, but they are trying to penetrate the grassroots and do their mobilization for the next elections. So
actually, we are told the mobilization they are doing is for none other than the NRM and President Museveni. Nothing special about that.
Well, I mean, I think PLU, Fabrice was calling it a pressure group.
Political pressure group.
It's a political pressure group.
It's an entertainment.
It's entertainment because it is headed by Balam Bargara in some place who is the head of entertainment. But I mean, for me, if you look at PLU, they've been clear on their objectives, okay? Some of them have actually said that their candidate should prepare to contest for 2026. I don't think these are naive or even idle statements that are just being thrown around. I think in the next period, we're actually going to see PLU even becoming more active. If you look at this tracker, we have done an extensive analysis of where PLU is, where they have appointed coordinators, how they are being positioned to actually take charge in the next period. And so we are likely to see PLU fielding members of parliament. I think Fabrice is gearing up to contest in Wakiso. Is it Wakiso Entebbe? Entebbe, do they have an MP?
Entebbe municipality.
Entebbe municipality.
You don't know that Entebbe has had MP.
Actually, Fabrice is the leader who takes over, who takes responsibility over even President Museveni's
in Entebbe.
In Entebbe.
Okay.
So whenever the president goes there, he reports to Fabrice.
He reports to Fabrice. So anyway,
or Fabrice reports to him.
No. You have already seen it. Even wherever the president goes, the chairman, LC1, is the one who welcomes him.
Yeah. So we are seeing that is happening. So PLU is actually trying to penetrate the grassroots and also gain ground.
Let me ask you something. Dr. Tweheyo, you people sit in the Central Executive Committee where a resolution was taken that President Yoweri Museveni will be the candidate of the NRM for as long as he wants. Now we see PLOE led by his son.
Not necessarily as long as he wants, as long as the party wants.
Yes, that was not the Chobe resolution.
No. The Chobe resolution
said President Yoweri Museveni Paka last.
I was part of the Chobe resolution. Our resolution is very clear. As long as the party still wants the president in the names of Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, it is now him to say no.
Now this PLOU thing, how do you mix it up? You have NRM people in PLO, you have NRM people this side. What's happening?
We have no problem of having what we call alternative choices.
But I am a member of the NRM. I am a member of the NRM. And a member of a pressure group called the
Fabrice, you are conflicted. You are conflicted. Let's hear from the Central Executive Committee.
We have what we call alternative choices. Even in a home, you can have a number of children who you say, okay, this one will take this role, this one will take this role. We have no problem with even having...
Are you saying PLOE is a structure of the NRM?
No. It's not a structure of NRM. It is a structure, a pressure group like Power People was.
Working for the NRM?
Working for itself. So, NRM has always given liberty to every other person to make alternative choices.
All right.
And when the alternative choices are looked at, and anybody looks back at NRM and says, okay, I think now that I've been given this liberty, it is best I get back to my home and get going. that is what happens.
I wanted to ask Musisi, when you look at the NRM and PLOE, who are you considering as your competitors in the next election?
What is the difference between the two?
There's a difference. PLOE.
What is the difference?
PLOE is not a registered political party. NRM is a registered political party.
Well, what I can tell you,
we have a situation where members are belonging to this side and the other.
Yes. And
so who are you targeting as your competitor?
Even those members.
Or you are also confused?
We have a state party, just like you see the Communist Party in China, which wants to occupy the entire electoral space. Even the people, the MPs, there are over 60 NRM MPs who attended the launch of PLU. If you ask them what they were launching, I'm sure they're not there. What is NRM? The makeup of NRM is founded on patronage. That even those ones we are guessing, because they don't know whether President Museveni will be for PLU in the next election, so you'd rather not miss the bus you attend. You get they don't know what PLU is. The head of PLU, General Muhoozi, has described the NRM of both Fabrice and Dr. Tweheyo as a fascist party.
No. At the moment, you don't allow internal criticism. The moment you don't allow internal criticism, then you're not democratic enough.
So there is no difference between PLU and NRM. The PLU is just a vehicle which is meant to deliver.
Isn't that everybody?
Spectrum Xtra, Radio 1 FM 90. Let's go for a break.
And of course, Fabrice is being wise in aligning to both.
No.
All right, let's go for a break now. When we return, we'll continue reflecting on this issue. Our topic of discussion today is the ending challenges in our governance structure, in our governance system in our country. And I have a panel of four who are here to share their views on this particular subject. And we also have comments that have come in on the WhatsApp number 0703-090-090. Keep those comments coming, and we'll sample them when we return from this. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Xtra, live on Radio 1 FM 90, reviewing the major events of the week. But today we have a thematic area. We are looking at the unending challenges in our governance system. My guest this evening, Dr. James Tweheyo, member of the Central Executive Committee of the NRM representing workers, Mr. Job Kija, governance expert, author of the latest Uganda Governance Trends Analysis Tracker. He works with Innovations for Democratic Engagement and Action. Mr. George Musisi, lawyer at the National Unity Platform Party, and His Worship Fabrice Rulinda, the mayor of Entebbe municipality. Now, gentlemen, one of the issues that has featured even when you see the comments that come in is the issue of the elections. And when you look at elections, it's an issue that we have debated. You hear the opposition members telling you that the elections are not going to be free and fair, but they organized to take part in the same elections. President Yoweri Museveni will tell you that Uganda is one of the countries in the world that has the best electoral processes. There are questions around the Electoral Commission and whether they enjoy, support and confidence from the members of the public. There's even one listener here who talked about how you cannot compete with somebody who actually appoints the Electoral Commission. Let's look at the elections. It's a very important issue, and it's something that we are getting into shortly. Dr. Tweheyo.
I made it clear here that our greatest challenge as a population is the populism in order to endear ourselves to the population for particularly voting. That is why, up to today, there is a scare if they saw me with Council Musisi walking around. The next day they will say, Council Musisi, is he NUP anymore? If they saw me, Tweheyo, a member of SEC, having a cup of coffee with Chagulanyi, they would say, now, we don't know even where to go. And that is the greatest problem that we have in this country. The moment we decide not to be real, to show the country that we are working for the benefit of the individuals, for the benefit of the population, that's why we are working, then we shall not get to the point where we shall have the democracy working. And that is what we must eliminate from our population. I have had a challenge with some of these members. You know, I'm a member of the iPod. I always go there to have a discussion. We discuss and agree and say, now, let us go and meet the president who, by any chance, is the chairman of NRM. Some people will say, why should we go and meet the president? But that's what you want. If anything, whether you are in whichever party, He is the president of this country, and until he is no longer the president, he must be recognized so. And therefore, if he is the president and the person who is responsible for the governance and leadership and the resource distribution of this country, then you should have an opportunity of having engagement with him for what you would think is best for the population. So that is where the challenge of governance comes in. The other challenge that we have is what we called having the technical teams not working to the best of what it should be. Some of the technical people are actually doing the job, but many of those technical people had issues because of the governance issues, particularly that had to do with the foreign investment organizations like World Bank, like the conditions they would come and give. They would say, now, if you are to give you funds for coffee, you must put an authority to do that. If you are to give you that, and you know, when it comes,
we are talking about elections, and you're talking about coffee.
Elections have to do.
Why are you running away from this subject?
Elections have to do with power and resources. And if we don't talk about the resources of the country, then we don't even need to talk about elections at all. Because that's the reason why every other
How
party is
do we
struggling to get
better
there.
our elections, Dr.
The only way to better our election is to make sure that we put it to the population and show them as the people who are struggling to be leaders, to make sure that what we are doing is for the best interests of the people. And how do we get that done? To have open discussion, to have dialogue, to have open engagements, to have the media to tell the truth, and also, instead of simply endearing ourselves, the members, for purposes of elections, and at the end of elections, we turn round and do our own things, then we shall not come anywhere close the democracy we want.
Fabrice, the issues of elections, you did take part in elections and also saw what
Very
happened.
contentious.
Actually, your situation ended up in court,
Yes.
if I can remember. How do we better our elections? Because there seems to be, there are issues there that we need to deal with.
One, and the most important thing is, leaders need to actually be what the word says, leaders. We need to stop politicking to the detriment of our country. We need to understand that our country should come first before any personal or private interests. Two, our people need to start picking quality over propaganda, and things like that. Three, as leaders, can we actually, like Doctor has mentioned, George here is my very good friend, personal friend.
When you talked about quality,
Yes,
I saw
yes.
him writing something
Yes.
down.
George here is my very good friend. I don't hide it in public that I am his friend. Dr. Terry has talked about the fact that here in Uganda, as soon as Fabrice says, I am Chagulanyi's friend, there is a problem. If I am seen having tea with Senyonyi, it has become, he has joined the other people. I appointed my deputy in Entebbe. My deputy is a member of the NUP. My secretary for education is from the DP. I picked people, I appointed people based on their qualities other than looking at politics.
Oh, because you had no option.
No, that's not true.
Council was dominated by the opposition.
No, not necessarily. Actually, NRM has the most councillors.
We know that the issues have been prominent. The issues include bringing of the leveling of the political field, and that I talked about that. The interference of the army in electoral processes and security agencies, the issue of the electoral commission, the arbiter, the changing of electoral laws, amending the electoral laws very late, providing finances, and I think Job hinted on it, providing finances to the electoral commission. Now, since 2001 up to 2021, we've had the same problems with the elections. Almost every generation, we get the same issues. in 2021, we even saw a very nasty turn. I think in 2001, we had got 2001. The Human Rights Watch report had said over 100 people had been killed due to electoral violence. That was the Kalangal Action Plan causing chaos. In 2021, we didn't have such a report, but even by their own standards, we still nursing wounds. We had a government report saying 54 people were shot on the streets of Kampala. 30 of them due to stray bullets, quote unquote. They've never been compensated to date. I am representing families of 18 missing Ugandans who are still missing loved ones as a result of that election. We have people who are still facing charges, all sorts of charges. So we can say that we've almost degenerated because we've not purged the gaps that have been identified by court. And I'm highlighting court because court is a neutral arbiter. When the two contesting parties disagree, they go to court. That's the civil way of that our laws envisaged. That if you read the judgment of Kiza Besigye in 2001 of the Supreme Court and the one of Amama Mbabazi 2016, so many years later, the court is still pointing to the same things that are problems with elections. So now, this week I had the CID director saying that, those who are prepared to mess up with the elections. And I'm like, okay, who are those? Because it seemed like he was warning terrorists who are planning to mess up with the elections. Who are those that are planning to mess up our elections? Because the issue is, one, the Electoral Commission should be a manager of elections, and every party should play its role. So the quality of elections, we've degenerated, and the last elections, we saw presidential candidates being treated like chicken thieves. Even Katumba was beaten. You can imagine. Katumba was beaten, of all people.
So, don't mess with my country.
Why do you minimize Mr. Katumba?
I pointed him out because
sorry for him.
I think Mr. Katumba
was the youngest,
was a bona fide candidate in
Yes.
the presidency.
Yes.
He registered perfectly. He got even the required signatures, by the way, to qualify for a candidate.
I agree.
For
Let's
presidency.
respect my candidate.
And surely let us give him the highest respect.
And I'm saying that
to President Museveni, to President Chagulanyi, and
there were three candidates who are publicly beaten, including Katumba.
All right.
So, my brother Fabrice earlier, to say that Job was sounding academic. Actually, Fabrice is sounding academic by talking about all these good things that we need to build. I agree, but what has led, when Fabrice says quality over propaganda, how have we got here? Your party is only presupposed preoccupied with maintaining in power. We don't talk about commercialization of politics, which has brought those councillors, by the way, and it's across the board. Divide, which has brought that kind of councillor. How did we get there? Why are people like Dr. Tweheyo disinterested? I'm giving him as an example, or Anderson, or Job. Why are they disinterested? And I'm always challenging the elites. It's even if close friends, when they hear that you want to go into politics, they advise you out of love. That's what are you going to do there?
I want the listeners to know that George was one of those close friends of mine, worried about me going into elections.
Exactly. That's what happens. That where do you go into that mad dance? And how have we got there? What I agree with Fabrice, that we need a national dialogue. A political national dialogue. Whether NRM stroke PLU is the outfit to lead us there, I highly doubt.
Comments coming in. Emmanuel Lumaladombo, Honorable Risina says quality of the elections can be improved by improving the president. The current parliament is actually the most useless in the history of Uganda. James Tweheyo now speaks a different language from the original James I knew while at UNATU. The corruption in this country is actually at the apex levels, and it has made abnormal things in this country look normal. So there is nothing new they are saying. That's a comment coming in from Caesar. Sammy writes in and says, I love the way the show is vibing this evening, and the Noop member in studio is addressing the issues with points on points. Whether we like it or not, the blame is on appointing authority. Why he can't dismiss the corrupt? He always ends up praising the corrupt every time he gets a chance to talk about them, the corrupt. God help us. That's a comment coming in from Sammy. Then we have a comment from Benon Fred Twinamasko, who writes and says, good evening, Radio 1. We are told that this is a government of fishermen who are capable of sharing iron sheets of vulnerable Karamajong. Until we get a government of experts and technocrats, and then we will learn how to live with the potholes and kill a garbage. Have a wonderful weekend. We We have a comment coming in from Katura, who is listening in from Mukono. He says, let Mr. Tweheyo remember that Parliament in its current form is like a good-looking castrated bull. It can never perform in terms of serving her intended purpose. President Tuhura wants it in that current form. Then we have another comment. The lack of consensus between our governance, in my opinion, is a blessing in disguise. Since we can't have a refinement, the ideal way, let's sit back and watch as they self-destruct. Maybe then is when there will be something fresh. That is Kiki listening in from Muyenga. Another comment, why can't the Parliament propose a bill to have a law allowing the LOP to be the party president or leader of the first runner-up party instead with a deputy LOP from second runner-up party to lead the opposition in Parliament? This I feel is more inclusive. That is Mola James listening in from Nigeria. The gentleman with the NRM with the NRM in place, without allowing those opposition parties to tally votes district by district, let's forget about democracy in Uganda. We can only vote for MPs. Only the president comes automatically from the process. That's Mawa Jacob listening in from West Nile. Then finally, thank you, Kenneth, for the show. Ugandans have been fooled and continue to be fooled. Unfortunately, people in authority and governance are so egoistic. Only care for themselves. They only care for themselves. No politicians has anybody's interest at heart. They unfortunately only think about themselves and their families and those close to them. That is the bitter truth, is the bitter reality. Well, gentlemen, let's sum up this discussion since we are coming close to the end of the show, and I'll come to you, Job. What's your take home looking at the governance situation in our country? But also, if you can, there's a listener here who actually talks about tallying votes and having them announced from a district by district, and the number of proposals that are probably might be in the pipeline to improve the election process. But let's sum it up. What's your take home?
Okay, so if you may quickly just allow me to talk about what needs to be done in terms of improving the elections.
Very quickly.
Number one, of course, the quality of elections has dwindled, as you can see from even the voter turnout. I think it has gone down. In 2016, we had about 69% turning up. In the past elections, we had about 57%, which is almost more than 10% reduction. That actually shows you that citizens are losing confidence in elections as the vehicle to exercising their democratic rights.
Unlike Rwanda, which has 98%.
98% turn up and then 99% voting for one person. Now, if you look at a number of issues have actually been raised in our observer reports and even packaged properly, if you look at the Citizens Compact for Free and Fair Elections, which we published in 2015, it's really elaborate on what needs to be done. There are issues to do with who appoints the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission is appointed by the President. The President is going to be participating as a participant in an election that is going to be refereed by a commission that he has appointed. So there's a problem with that. We need to change who appoints the Electoral Commission. If you look at security, the role of security, George did mention, but if you look at the violence that is happening in most of these elections, yes, we can try to blame a number of these political actors for instigating this violence. But I think on a number of occasions, and even when you look at what happened just recently in George's place, it was until when the security came in, that actually we started seeing this violence shaping up. We need to be able, we are talking about quality of the people that we choose to Parliament and even these other elective positions. Why? Because we have commercialized elections so much. Right now we hear that going to Parliament costs about between 400 million and 1 billion shillings. So if you can afford that...
On the low side.
On the low side. Between 400 million and 1 billion shillings. 400 on the lower side, 1 billion mid-size, and maybe higher than that. Elections actually are being procured by people that have money but are incompetent. So if you can buy the election, whatever you are, whatever quality you are, you will make it Parliament. And so when you look at, when you tell me that these people are vetted, the question is who is vetting these people in that August House? I think we need to be able to make it, first of all, to put the cost of engagement in electoral malpractice so high in that if you are found to be culpable as having engaged in election malpractice. If you've bribed, if you have rigged elections, you should be disqualified from participating in an election, maybe even forever, and even locked up, actually. We need to make it so costly for you to engage in electoral malpractice, in election violence. We are looking at the credibility of the voters' register. As we speak, if you ask the Electoral Commission what's up with the voters' register, a lot of times they are picking data from NIRA. NIRA is telling you they have extended the expiry of our IDs, and in that regard, even the process of registration of persons where the EC is actually going to be picking data from to compile its voters register. So you realize that there's actually some contention around there, and we don't know whether the EC will actually meet its target of having a credible, verifiable voters register. The EC needs to be able to be facilitated to play its mandate. Right now, as we speak, you are talking about the money. In 2024-2025, they asked for about 800 billion shillings. What was allocated to them is about 8 billion shillings.
All right. Very quickly, as we come to the end of the show, George, very quickly, your comments, your closing remarks.
I think the country needs to talk to each other. The problems we have transcend political parties. The problems we have are governance issues. And someone was talking about that where the old guards will be, where will the old guards be in 20, 15 years? But there will be old guards. People stopped aging. Even in 20, 15 years, there will be people who will be old. There will be older guns. So I think that we need a national conversation where we can talk to each other, irrespective of parties. Because short of that, the polarization, and those are just symptoms that Fabrice and Dr. Toya talk about, where I attend Fabrice's function and then I'm labeled PLU and vice versa. Those are just, even if you look at the anger on social media, those are just symptoms of a broken state. And short of that, I think anyone who is interested in the posterity of this country, we need to have a decent national conversation. All right,
good news coming in from South Africa. Uganda up by 2-1. Goal scored by Omedi and Roger Mato. And this game is now in additional time. They have added 3 minutes. It's in the 90s and they have added 3 minutes. Fabrice, your closing remarks as we come to the end.
I guess that's part of elections. Well, George has summarized what I've been talking about the whole show. Uganda needs to have a sober conversation. 62 years, and we need to understand that politics is not necessarily enmity. We may have, George and I come from different vehicles. We may not agree on everything. Actually, the best of friends don't agree on everything. We may have different ideologies, we may have different beliefs, but we meet at a certain point and find consensus. If we did that with our politics, we would be going very far for our country. We need to understand that after you have gotten office, for those that seek office, or if you have lost office,
all right,
you need to sit together, agree, and see how you can have the divergent views work towards the development of our country.
Dr. Toye, your closing remarks as we come to the end.
I'm looking forward to the time when a president like Museveni will sit together with a principal like Kyagulanyi and have a discussion straight away, looking at each other in the face, other than doing what we call a cat and mouse engagement. Once we reach that level, then we shall have built the democracy and we shall be the best leaders for this country. But as long as some of our leaders, like I've always said, shy away from having a direct engagement and showing it to the public and to the people led that they are ready for engagement and dialogue, we shall still have those challenges of democracy. We shall have those challenges of violence. And I pray that we become the leaders.
All right.
No.
With that, we come to the end of Spectrum Extra. Let me thank you, dear panelists, for making time to actually be with us.
Yes.
And you listeners for tuning in.
And is
I've been your host,